please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Moshe Katri, Managing Director, Wedbush Securities. Very important today because he's joining us in our studio. Moshe, thank you very much for dropping by into our studios here in Mumbai. Well, first, the big motherhood question. Is Indian IT out of the woods? Can you really see them taking over that digital challenge?
Yeah, so are we out of the woods? So far, so good for 2018. My biggest concern is that we started in a very specific, similar way in 2017, and then sometime in May, June of last year, things went kind of south. So we have to keep on tracking some of the trends. At this point, it seems that spending trends are looking better. Look, the industry went through a very massive disruption during the past 3 years. You know, the models moved from more to less labor-intensive models. A lot of the delivery moved to the cloud. A lot of the delivery moved to a software as a service model. Companies are using automation. All this is introducing cannibalization, and then you almost have to be in a catch-up mode to all these trends if you're not really set up for that. That's really challenging. The good news about this year is that, as I said, spending trends are looking better. Even on some of the legacy stuff, it seems like companies are spending more. Okay. Digital initiatives are moving from millions of dollars in initiatives to billions of dollars of initiatives, especially if you look at some of the banks. So if you have the right skill base, you should be in a decent shape. BPO looks really good. BPO has been healthy for a couple of years now. We cover 3 of the pure plays, WNS, EXL, and Genpact. These are companies that have had beat and raise quarters for about 1.5 years now. So that demand looks very healthy. It's a bit different than IT services. And these companies kind of reinvented themselves because now they're doing a lot of work in analytics on top of the traditional business. So far, so good. The tone looks good. And as I said to you 5 minutes ago, trends look good. The only thing that can kind of make things go south is, you know, the politicians, but we'll see what happens.
Moshe, good morning. So, you know, you said even for legacy orders, things are beginning to look good. But this point on digital and the fact that, you know, the orders are turning large, and we've seen that play out in mid-cap IT in India in particular, where you don't have, you know, perhaps the legacy issues. Do you think that still remains the better way to play compared to the likes of, say, Infosys and TCS?
Yeah, so it all depends. So let's look first at the digital mix of the tier ones. I would say probably the leader among the group is Accenture. For Accenture, what we call the new is about 55% of revenues. And then the next, below that is Cognizant at about 30. And then if you look at TCS and Infosys, they're probably somewhere around 20, low 20s. And then if you look at Wipro, it's probably lagging a bit behind. Now, if you look at some of the small caps, even the mid caps, you have to look at the mix. We cover a couple of pure play digital companies, EPAM, Luxoft, Globant. These are companies that generate 100% of their revenue base from digital, and these are companies that are growing 25, 30% a year, because this is really the sweet spot right now. And there are companies that are getting there. We cover a company called Virtusa. Virtusa's done well. They've had a pretty difficult time after acquiring Polaris a year and a half ago, and now it seems that it's kind of beginning to pay off. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned is that the largest vertical in the sector is BFSI. Yes. And that's the wild card. BFS, had a good start last year. It didn't end well. BFS is having a good start this year. So far, it's looking better. Okay. But again, I always tell clients, budgets are not engraved in stone. If I told you, if my early budget says that I'm going to be up 2-3%, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen. Things change very quickly in the sector.
In fact, I also wanted to ask you about the large cap companies. We recently spoke to the management of TCS, and they indicated that the deal pipeline has picked up a lot over the last 2-3 months. They were talking about $6 billion of deals just in the last 3 months.
We heard the same thing, absolutely.
Yes, but the stock has gone up about 15% this year. You think the good news is already in the price?
I would say a couple of things on this. One, most of the investors that we talk to are still staying clear and away from the sector. Okay. So there is we definitely will see the incremental buyer if we will continue to see some of the trends that we thought were going to happen earlier this year. That's a good thing, number one. Number two, if we are going to see better growth rates for some of the large cap names, I think the multiples will continue to re-rate because it's really difficult to find large cap tech companies that are growing north of 10% a year. Again, we're going to see a deviation probably this year from what we've seen in the past 2-3 years, which is re-acceleration of growth. A lot of the bears that always focus on margins will probably be disappointed because the margin outlook looks okay, doesn't look bad. And then if you're really worried about H-1B visas, even that looks better, despite all the noise that's out there and continue to be out there.
Okay. Will you expand your focus in India to more mid-caps?
Well, I'm just telling you what we cover. We cover a bunch of names that trade in the U.S. We cover Cognizant, which could be considered the mid-cap. Okay. But as I said, for them, 30% of the revenue base is digital. Roughly 55% of revenues is BFS, 30% is healthcare. These verticals that are doing better.
Okay, so in terms of multiples, TCS, for example, there was a time when it crunched to say 15, 16 times. It's almost back to trading at 20 times thereabout. Infosys went to about 13, is back to about 16, 17 times.
Sure.
How much more do you think is there a room? Because right now it's only a promise. We haven't seen that turn into the numbers yet.
So a couple of things. One, if we are going to see growth north of 10% this year, I can probably guarantee that next year's numbers are not showing you 10% growth yet. So numbers will go higher, therefore the multiple will continue to re-rate. That's my view. So at this point, I think it's still too early.
So there is a lot of scope for growth and for transformation in this sector
that is
now,
correct.
Right? Which company do you think is the best place to leverage on that?
In our universe, we like Accenture, we like Cognizant, we like the WNS among the 3 pure play BPO names. And then you have some of the other laggards. Let's put it this way. This is a good year for probably the entire space. And I'm saying it for a couple of reasons. One, because we're seeing better spending on the legacy side, it'll provide enough time for some of the other companies to ramp up their digital strategy. So it's a good time for that transformation to happen, because you're almost getting, you're getting a extra time to do what you need to do without the crunch time that you had in the past few years.
Okay, but are you? I mean, in your list, you didn't mention any of the Indian companies. Are you happy with the way they're dealing with their workforce? After all, it has to be either retrained or fired and rehired. Is that satisfactory?
I think it is. And remember, when Accenture started this digital transformation, that was 5 years ago. Most of the India-based firms probably started a couple of years ago. Okay. It's not a transformation that happens in a day, especially when you're carrying 200,000-300,000 people on your bench. It's going to be a work in progress. That's how you have to look at it. Everybody's doing something about this, but it doesn't happen in a day. And it's going to be a long transformation unless you see some large M&A transactions, which is highly unlikely.
Okay. Just last question from my end. Some of these fresh, new technologies, blockchains, for example, or artificial intelligence, are there any Indian companies which are doing work here?
Yeah. So many of the BPO companies, the 3 BPO companies that are mentioned, are doing a lot of work in AI and robotics. Okay. That's how they've been able to transform their business model. And these are companies, I mean, I mentioned WNS, they'll probably grow 13-15% this year. Pretty impressive for any sort of company in the space. On the blockchain side, you're definitely seeing some work that's getting done. IBM advertises it across the board. Accenture does some work, especially on the blockchain technologies that are related to enterprises, B2B. But at this point, I don't think that's really going to move the needle for this for the industry.
All right. Moshe Katri, it's a pleasure having you with us. Thank you very much for dropping by in our studio. And of course, more importantly, giving us a perspective on how to look at IT companies.
Good to be here.